Wang Yi, a member of the Political Bureau of the Communist Party of China Central Committee, Director of the Office of the Central Commission for Foreign Affairs and China's Special Representative on the boundary question between China and India's Special Representative and National Security Advisor Ajit Doval had a candid and in-depth exchange of views on the China-India boundary question, according to the release. The two sides reiterated their commitment to following the consensus reached by the leaders of the two countries and maintaining peace and tranquility in the border areas, so as to create a favorable atmosphere for the sound and steady development of bilateral relations. They stressed that consultations on a framework for settling the boundary question would be advanced in accordance with the agreement on political parameters and guiding principles for settlement of the China-India boundary question concluded in April 2005 and consensus reached at subsequent special representatives' talks, with the aim of seeking a fair, reasonable and mutually acceptable solution. The two sides agreed to establish a demarcation expert group and a working group on border management and control under the framework of the Working Mechanism for Consultation and Coordination, WMCC, on China-India border affairs. The demarcation expert group will advance discussions on achieving early and substantive progress in boundary delimitation, while the working group will focus on border management and control. The two groups will first define their respective terms of reference. The two sides also agreed to use existing diplomatic and military channels, including the WMCC, meetings between commanders and other mutually agreed mechanisms, to promptly handle situations along the border, address outstanding issues and avoid misunderstanding and miscalculation in areas along the line of actual control, LAC. They also discussed ways to enhance understanding of the LAC in relevant areas to facilitate better border management. To further improve border management measures, the two sides agreed to add 2 general-level talk meeting points and establish 2 new military hotlines in the eastern and middle sectors of the border. The two sides spoke positively of progress in cross-border cooperation. India expressed appreciation for China's efforts to facilitate more pilgrimages by official Indian pilgrims to Mount Gang Rinpoche and Lake Mapamun Tso in southwest China's Zhejiang Autonomous Region. The two sides also welcomed the reopening of 3 boundary trade markets and agreed to strengthen exchanges and cooperation in areas including boundary trade and pilgrimages, and jointly foster an atmosphere of dialogue, peace, consultation, and cooperation in the boundary areas. They agreed to hold a new meeting of the expert-level mechanism on cross-boundary rivers in September and maintain communication on matters including hydrological information sharing and the renewal of relevant memorandums of understanding. The two sides also agreed to hold the 26th round of talks in India in 2027. The 25th round of talks between the special representatives of China and India on the boundary question was held in Beijing on August 25, 2026. The two sides reached the following 8-point consensus. 1. Commit to leaders' guidance and maintain peace. The two sides reaffirmed their commitment to uphold the guidance received from the leaders of the two countries, maintain peace and tranquility in the border areas, and create an atmosphere for the healthy and steady development of bilateral relations. 2. Advance framework negotiations for settlement. Both sides underlined their commitment to advancing negotiations on a framework for the settlement of the boundary question in accordance with the 2005 Agreement on Political Parameters and Guiding Principles and the consensus reached in subsequent special representative talks, in pursuit of a fair, reasonable, and mutually acceptable solution. 3. Establish expert group and working group on boundary matters. Under the framework of the Working Mechanism for Consultation and Coordination, WMCC, on China-India border affairs, both sides agreed to establish an expert group on boundary delimitation and a working group on border management to advance discussions on an early and substantial harvest of boundary delimitation and border management. The first task for both groups is to agree on their respective terms of reference. 4. Address ground situations through existing channels. Both sides agreed that any situation on the ground would be addressed promptly through existing diplomatic and military channels, including the WMCC, local commander-level meetings, and other agreed mechanisms. The goal is to resolve outstanding issues and avoid misunderstanding and miscalculation along the line of actual control, LAC. The two sides also discussed ways to improve understanding of the LAC in appropriate areas for better border management. 5. Increase military meeting points and hotline channels. To improve border management measures, both sides agreed to add 2 additional meeting points for holding the general level mechanism senior highest military commander meetings. Similarly, 2 additional channels of border military hotlines were agreed upon for the eastern and middle sectors. 6. Strengthen trans-border cooperation, pilgrimage and trade. Both sides noted progress on trans-border cooperation. The Indian side appreciated China's efforts to increase the number of batches of Indian official pilgrimage to Mount Gang Rinpoche and Lake Mapamunso in China's Xizang Autonomous Region. Both sides appreciated the reopening of the 3 designated border trading points and agreed to strengthen exchanges and cooperation in border trade, pilgrimage, and other areas to create an atmosphere of dialogue, peace, consultation, and cooperation in the border regions. 7. Hold expert-level meeting on trans-border rivers. The two sides agreed to hold the next meeting of the China-India expert-level mechanism on trans-border rivers in September 2026 and maintain communication on issues including hydrological data sharing and the renewal of relevant memoranda of understanding. 8. Hold 26th round of special representative talks in India. The two sides agreed to hold the 26th round of special representative talks in India in 2027. Key agreement: uphold leaders' guidance, maintain border peace advance framework negotiations per 2005 agreement, establish expert group, delimitation, and working group, management, under WMCC, address ground situations via existing diplomatic and military channels, add 2 military meeting points plus 2 hotline channels, eastern and middle sectors, strengthen trans-border pilgrimage, trade, and cooperation, hold expert-level mechanism on trans-border rivers in September 2026, hold 26th SR talks in India in 2027. Here is an analysis of the consensus through the lens of Marxist dialectical theory. 1. The non-antagonistic nature of the contradiction, seeking unity. The core of dialectics is the unity of opposites. The China-India boundary issue is an inherently acute contradiction of sovereignty. However, the 8-point consensus proves that both sides currently recognize and have chosen a non-antagonistic development path for this contradiction. Points 1. Peace and tranquility, and 2. Political settlement, are the clearest manifestations of this. By committing to maintain peace and tranquility and seeking a fair, reasonable, and mutually acceptable solution, both sides acknowledge that resolving the issue serves their common, fundamental interests. This creates the necessary premise and favorable atmosphere for handling the contradiction peacefully, preventing it from sliding into antagonistic confrontation. 2. Quantitative change to qualitative change, institutionalizing the process. Dialectics holds that quantitative change is the necessary preparation for qualitative change. The final resolution of the boundary issue is a qualitative leap, but it requires a long and complex accumulation of quantitative changes. Point 3. Establishing expert groups, and Point 8, next round in 2027, are precisely the critical institutional arrangements to facilitate this leap. By setting up a delimitation expert group and a border management working group, and by scheduling future high-level meetings, both sides have transformed the resolution process into an institutionalized, long-term endeavor. The shift from merely building the framework to digging into details, as described in Chinese state media, is a classic example of quantitative accumulation paving the way for a future qualitative breakthrough. 3. The principal and secondary contradictions, crisis management as the priority. In a complex web of contradictions, the principal contradiction and secondary contradictions can transform depending on the conditions. Point 4. Addressing ground situations, and Point 5. Adding military channels, clearly illustrate this transformation. At the current stage, preventing minor frictions on the ground from escalating into major conflict has become the principal contradiction. To manage this, the two sides agreed to promptly address any situation through existing channels and to add 2 meeting points and 2 additional hotline channels. These measures aim to strictly control the secondary aspects of the border issue, occasional clashes, to ensure they do not undermine the overall peace and stability. The principal aspect, thereby creating a favorable environment for the healthy development of bilateral relations. 4. The identity within struggle, cooperation in non-sensitive areas. Contradictions feature both struggle, the sovereignty dispute, and identity, common interests. The wisdom of dialectics lies in finding the latter within the former. Point 6. Strengthening trans-border cooperation on pilgrimage and trade is a classic application of this principle. Even with the core sovereignty contradiction unresolved, both sides can find concrete, non-sensitive points of convergence. India's appreciation for expanded pilgrimage access to Mount Kailash and Lake Manasarovar, and the reopening of border trade points, show that cooperation is possible within the struggle. By fostering an atmosphere of dialogue, peace, consultation, and cooperation, both sides are accumulating political trust to eventually tackle the core contradiction. Point 7. Trans-border rivers expert meeting similarly reflects this cooperative logic. Agreeing on hydrological data sharing is a technical, low-risk consensus that prevents a secondary issue from becoming a new flashpoint, thus serving the broader bilateral relationship. 5. The particularity and complexity of the contradiction, abandoning the one-size-fits-all approach. The 8-point consensus also reveals a significant unspoken message. Reports indicate that the phrase package deal, previously used in negotiations, was notably absent from this round's final consensus. This precisely reflects the particularity and extreme complexity of this specific contradiction. Facing such a historically entrenched territorial dispute, attempting to solve everything with a single, all-encompassing one-size-fits-all plan might defy the objective laws of contradiction development. The current choice, focusing on institutional framework building, point 3, crisis management, points 4 and 5, and cooperation in secondary fields, points 6 and 7, is a realistic, pragmatic response to this complexity. It indicates that both sides have chosen to prioritize resolving the simpler, more operable parts of the contradiction first, accumulating consensus to create conditions for the final resolution. This is not avoidance but a dialecticals incrementals approach tailored to the highly specific nature of this dispute.